Folks, I've got with me a very interesting gentleman of the blues from the US, a very good singer, songwriter, and instrumentalist. His show name is Jimmy Vivino. And what a fine brand of music in this one. He has Joe Bonamassa as one of his guests on the single track or the actual album track of Blues in the 21st. And for the life of me, I've forgotten completely the name of the brand new
Oh,
album,
well,
Jimmy.
the name of the album is the I think maybe the third tune. It's called or fourth tune. Gonna be two of those. It's gonna be two of those days. Gonna be two of those days. But I almost called it Blues in the 21st, but it seemed a little too. Oh, that's kind of trite, right? I mean, we know we're in the 21st century, and I thought going to be two of those days, which is a play on, when you get up sometimes and say, oh boy, things start going wrong right away. And you're like, oh, it's going to be one of those days, right? I said, no, this is so bad. It's going to be two of those days. So,
I love the tune for the simple fact that after listening to the album 5 times, the tunes that I tend to gravitate to are the first three ones. So
then,
Blues in the 21st.
and then Ruby, right?
Yeah, Ruby.
Then maybe Ain't Nothing Gonna Be All Right is the third one, I
Yeah,
think.
ain't
Those are the
nothing.
first three singles. And for that reason, they were put one, two, and three, because they're
Mm.
my favorites too. So, I mean, and really, Yannick, some people don't, you have to get people's attention in the first couple of songs,
Yeah.
and that's the point of those three, because I think you agree with me that those three kind of get your attention, and you
Yeah.
have a diversity, and I like to diversify in the groove and the keys, so nothing's in the same key or the same groove to begin, and that, I think we managed that one.
You did. Finally, the other albums songs that I actually quite enjoy because of the way that they're being played out. Blues in the not blues, but gonna be two of those days is one of them.
Yeah.
Then there's
I can remind you of the titles if you explain what it feels like to you, because
Bad Wolf, I think, is the
oh,
other
yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah. Beware the Wolf. Well, that's very much, I worked with Hubert Sumlin for a long time, who was Howlin' Wolf's guitar player. And I shamelessly, kind of channel Hubert in that and Wolf both at the same time. But the messages, it's an old message of the three pigs, some of those old bedtime stories still apply to what's going on in the world. And, you know, and be careful, like, for veiled heroes, who they may be underneath that veil.
There's that, unfortunately, right now with what's happening between your country and mine. It's kind of scary because one of my friends said something's gonna happen. There's gonna be a third world war somewhere.
And then we're going to ask for Canada to be on our side, as usual, as they always have. We've always been on the same side of things. I think I mean, we don't have to get into it too much, but it's almost too current to ignore the situation of what's going on. And though
Yeah.
it may seem laughable, you have, people in business tend to have different tactics, and some of them are bullying tactics, and some of
Yeah.
them are threats, and some of them are, maybe if I'm nice to you, you'll do business with me, and I think that we're in a situation now where it's like somebody's playing, hardball, but never realizing that there might be an alternative way to talk to people. And I
Yeah,
can
well, they agree to it up to a degree, but then there's always someone that says I'm going home with my ball.
Yeah, and you and I know that as people in the arts, that really we choose a lesser of evils. Everybody has to do evil to stay in business in the world, you know. I mean, they have to do stuff that I don't want to even know about. The problem with social media now is we get so many opinions and so much information, and we don't know what's real anymore. And I think I've At my age, at 70, and I just turned 70, I can't not comment on what's happening, in the world.
You're not 70. If you already
Well,
got good genes in the family.
but that's because I still have things to say and do. If I retired after 26 years with Conan and sitting with on a gig that we called having the golden handcuffs, meaning that you're doing great, but you got these golden handcuffs. You can't go anywhere but do that. So now my retirement is going to all these towns and playing my music for people that will say to me, hey, I watched you on TV since I was 12 or I was 13, and they're musicians now. And they'll say to you, you're the reason I have a guitar habit that I can't stop buying guitars. Joe Bonamassa always said to me, you're the one that started this stuff. Everybody looks at me, and Vivino, when I was a kid, I used to run into him and his father. Joe and his father had a music store in Utica, New York, upstate.
Okay.
And they would come down to New York City, and I saw this tiny 12-year-old kid with a guitar that was twice as big as him that was playing great when he was a kid. So I knew there was something coming. And we see kids every day now that we have Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. We see that when anybody says, "Oh, music's dead," I think they're not paying attention.
No.
There's so much coming.
No, there's a lot of new talent, and a lot of people. Well, a lot here in Canada. I know in the U.S. as well. And internationally, when it comes to blues, the International Memphis Blues Challenge has done quite boost to the blues communities across the world, because you have these unknowns that suddenly have their name emblazoned in the listings, and
Yes.
if they end up winning, it's even twice as flamboyant. To give you an example, right now, Jose Raymond, blues girl from PEI, which is an island off about an hour and 15 minutes from where I live. She won one of the accolades from that particular challenge. I'm still waiting for her to actually respond to my emails in regards to getting her into an interview. But
the ladies are coming on strong. In fact, two of my good friends are from Canada. One is Sue Foley, who is one of the great. I mean, I know there's a lot of yak about this woman and that woman,
but Sue Foley
is in line in front of Sue Foley, because she's the real deal. I've stood toe to toe with her and had the best times. And my friend J.W. Jones is from up there, and Colin James, who I've known since the 80s, and he was one of the first ones really doing some great stuff with the Little Big Band and some other stuff there, and those guys and ladies are as good as anyone I know, and it's taken Sue, because she took a vacation, she took off. She lived in Austin and she was doing great, and then she got married and went up to, and her son, by the way, plays guitar great too, and he's kind of shy about it, I think, but he's gonna come on. And there's so many great musicians up over the border, and of course we have you to thank for Neil Young and Joni Mitchell and so many other people that came through here.
But then there's
April
the people
Wine.
from the
April Wine.
April Wine.
Yeah,
they're still touring, as far as I understand, but I don't follow them myself because I just have no time. I have all these great artists that I have to do interviews with, but
and Steppenwolf. When I was a kid, Steppenwolf came down from Canada.
And then there's Quebec's contribution to the blues with Offenbach when they were still a band.
Yeah. And that's what, Rick James went there to get out of the army. he defected. He actually, Rick James went up there, and I think he was playing with the Sparrow, maybe with some of Steppenwolf's, or with Neil Young or some band up there, and in the late '60s during the Vietnam War, and then he came back. I don't think they ever caught him or went after him, but he did go up there to get out of the draft, man. And,
draft dodging is its finest.
But I mean, at the border, it means absolutely nothing when it comes to music. So it
Uh,
shouldn't mean anything anywhere else.
the only
It's
time, actually, the only time it means something, unfortunately, is when the band member or band members have something on file like a DUI. At that point, they're barred. They have to get it pardoned before they come into Canada. But
I have a story for you about that if you have time. That's very interesting about that.
well, let's get into your
I
story
came
first.
up there, Joe Ciccarelli, who's still producing great records today. Joe Ciccarelli and I were called by Tim Trombley, who was in Toronto, and he was Luba's A&R guy. So
Okay.
we went up there in the '80s to record Luba, and we recorded at RCA Studios, and we recorded at there was Studio Montreal, I think, and we recorded at the place called the Metal Factory in Toronto. We recorded at 3 different places, and we took the tapes, and we were taking the tapes back to the United States,
Okay.
and we got caught with the tapes going back over the border with these tapes that we recorded in Canada, and they busted us and they put us in separate rooms,
Oh,
and they were like, and they got different stories out of us because I said, well, we had the tapes with us. We were just going to try and get a record deal with the tapes. And they found out then we had recorded up there. And the guy says to me, and I laugh because I never heard the term. He goes, "You lie from A to Z," and I'd never heard the word Z. And to me, and with all due respect, he sounded like Inspector Clouseau when he was grilling me, and they were like hardcore about that, and they were hardcore about Canadian content,
mm.
and that not bringing the tapes back over the border. Finally, somehow Capitol Records, maybe a little graft, maybe it's some money to the government, they let us go and they let us take the tapes back to mix them in the United States, but it was funny because I never realized how tight the security was up there.
It's
People are yelling about when people yelled at me about, oh, there's no security at the Canadian border, I tell them that story. I said, yes, there is when it comes to smuggling tapes, and it does.
Yeah, no, when it comes to security, I think Canada has a very tight border, regardless of how many people say no, that's not true. Because I've been on the receiving end of other versions where literally when you were stopping to declare your goods with an agent, you had an actual traffic light system, the green, red,
Yeah,
and yellow, and you had to push a button. It
yeah.
was randomized, and if you had green, you were okay. You went without even talking to anyone. If you had red, they pulled you aside. If you hit yellow, you had to push again.
Well, listen, when I came back up through the border on a bus with Conan O'Brien and the band and the whole
Uh-huh.
show, and we were doing a live show up there in between, getting our gig at TBS after we got, screwed by NBC, we went on the road and we went up to Canada to do a show, and it was a great show. But crossing into Canada, the bus got pulled over. They came on and took me off the bus because of what had happened 30 years earlier, right? And Conan's like, "Are you some kind of a criminal?" I said, "Yeah, I tried to smuggle some rock and roll across the border." He goes, "Well, I always loved you, but now I love you to have a record." And I said, "Well, and can't, they'll never free. Every time I go through, there's a little bit
Yeah.
going, we have something here, Mr. Vivino." So yeah,
Yeah, but it was, trust me, they
yeah,
have a mind like a seal trap because of the system that they have shared between Canada and the US.
yeah, it's like Interpol.
Pretty much. So coming to the album that you released, but it's not available entirely yet. Um, Tell me about
Mine,
how long it took to actually make it happen.
it's coming out on February 14th. There's 11 songs altogether on the
Hmm.
CD, or when you stream it or download it. But on the LP, we have to cut 2 songs because on a vinyl you
Hmm.
can only fit around 42 minutes, 44 minutes tops comfortably, 22 aside, and then it gets
Okay.
bad sounding, and you can't cut that many tunes in. So I had to cut 2 out, unfortunately. But somebody said to me, well, that's kind of good because then people have to go to other formats to get the other two. I said, well, I guess so. It's that they're kind of, I guess they become bonuses only to the vinyl people that buy. But most young people ask me if we're going to have vinyl, which is amazing to me. It's almost the opposite of the way it used to be when things, yeah.
It's the only problem with vinyl. I don't have a record player, but my stepson does. So he's into vinyl whenever he can get his hands on it without overdoing it and blowing his budget. But the only big problem with vinyl is if you're the one that's doing the selling and you're not selling it through a merch location and you're bringing a box on tour because you want to sell some of that merch at a table, it becomes costly because
it's cumbersome.
It takes up space, and vinyl, that people believe it or not, when you have more than one vinyl disc in a box, it weighs almost like 50 pounds for a small box.
Oh, we're going to pay 80, going to pay like for 2 boxes, you're going to pay $80 and over if you're going to ship it, on the plane with you. So what we find is cheaper, but it's always a risk of saying, hey, I'm going to be at this hotel in 2 weeks, ship the vinyl to the hotel. But it doesn't always work out, man. And also, if people want to buy it off your website, it's a pain in the neck to package it up and ship it. It costs a lot, and it's safe. The U.S. mail, I don't know about the Canadian mail, but the USPS, they will find anything that says fragile on it and beat the crap out of it. So
it doesn't matter what you use. The problem is that mail sorting systems are equipped to do what they need to do fast.
Yeah.
The same goes with couriers. Many of them are mechanically sorted. It's all a conveyor belt system that goes almost 60 kilometers an hour, or around about 30 miles an hour for Americans. But
it's amazing what they can get overnighted to you, though, for a cost. But it's not worth it. But anyway, we're back to 1955 with Elvis touring with his car loaded with 78s, and they had to put all the band equipment, the upright bass and the drums and the amps, all on top of the car, strapping on top of the car, so they could fit a couple of boxes, just fill the car with 78s. And if you hit a bump with a 78, you got broken records to deal with. But we're back to that where the CD or the record or whatever you're selling is really the only way for you to sell them, because the money I've unfortunately lived too long and know what it used to be like. But and everybody complained about the record company, but the record company did a lot when you think about it now for their piece of the pie. They took care of all of that packaging and shipping and, getting to record stores and all of that stuff. And now that we're responsible for it, you realize this is hard work, man. It's another job just trying to do that. And the streaming doesn't pay a damn thing. I mean, like a quarter of a penny per spin. Somebody can download over 1 million times something, right? And you're still only going to get a couple of $100, not like it used to be. But you have a young bunch of artists that don't remember what it was like before, so they're fine with how it is now. And it's for the old people to complain and the young people to say, you're old. What are you complaining about? You got a record. You got a band. You're out there playing music. And I'm like, well, maybe you got a point there. Yeah.
Well, truth be told, the as much as it angers me when it comes to streaming being so belittling to artists, the fact that actually most artists are all on there, be it independent or be it professional, be it whatever. If they decide to actually become one of the gang with a streaming service, people are gonna stumble across that and they're gonna go, wait a minute, who's this? Why does it sound so good?
You know what I say now? We're all independents.
Yeah, pretty much.
We're all like independents, and we're all in business for ourselves, and it's up to us. And that's why we have, Instagram and Facebook, and even our publicists my publicist will say, "Could you please post this?" Because
Yeah,
occasionally I'll get I'll do a magazine interview and it will be actually a paper magazine, but mostly they're e-zines, they're online magazines, and for me, the reviewers have been very, very kind to me so far. They seem to like it, and I'm glad that, because I didn't want to make, with this record, I wanted to do the first record where I wrote every song, and I wasn't doing covers, even though some of them you'll go, that reminds me of such and such. Well, yeah, of course, because we all wear our influence on our sleeves. We have to, because we still love those artists so much, So it makes us feel good to say to ourselves, that one reminds me of Muddy or Howlin' Wolf, or that one reminds me of even Cream, or Leslie West, or that reminds me of this or that, So nothing is original, as you know. It's all derivative of what we take in our minds from, I think, pretty much when you're 8 or 9 years old. That's when it starts. That's
true.
when, you know.
The fun thing about the album is that it's just it. How can I put it? You put in your soul into this album. I mean, if you end up kicking the bucket in the next 48 hours, it's going to live on
Yeah.
forever. But uh, the the whole thing is so tantalizing that you can't stop wanting to use it in a dance recital. You want to play it on air. You want to play it in your car. I love the blues in the 21st because Joe Bonamassa was on it, but I still enjoyed having you singing because it gave me an instance of the voice from this mysterious man on in the front of the actual album.
And about the thing about that is, we pretty much. I was speaking to somebody about this yesterday. He said, "Well, the tracks have kind of a live feel about them," and I said, "Well, that's because we cut them live with the vocal live. I cut them with trio, guitar, bass, drums live, and then just started. I would add an organ or a piano. I sent the track to Joe. He played on it. I had Sebastian in the room with me when we did the last track, going back up the country. It's just guitar, upright bass, and harmonica, and we had like two mics in front of us and did it live, like
That
John and
was awesome.
I live. Yeah,
But that was awesome, especially because we get to feel the real you having fun doing this because we can that people, believe it or not, if you're smiling or have a smile on your face, you can hear it through someone talking. But it's the very ending of it is yeah, we're good.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I said, well, I guess that's it. And John says, yeah, I guess that's it. I said, there ain't no more. Because John and I are such good friends, and we were actually we met up down in Greenwich Village, and we had something to do. John and I and Dion DiMucci were Dion, who's still active, and he's 85 years old, and he calls me with a new song every other week. So I have good role models. We were doing something together downtown, and John and I met up and said, "Hey, yeah, let's go to that old coffee shop we used to go to on the corner of Bleecker and Thompson." And so we meet down there, and there's no espresso shop. It's gone. I said, well, let's go over to Vesuvio Bakery and get it's gone. We finally walked over to Cafe Reggio, and it had become like this place that was selling merch, and tourists were around the corner, and I realized that everything was gone and replaced with something else. So that most of these songs come from life experience, though it's combined. Nothing is about any one person or any one event. It's just during COVID, when I wrote most of the album, I'm sitting around. I got a choice of watching, like toxic news or the same old movies on Netflix or whatever again, or writing songs. So I started writing songs and playing a lot, and so the whole thing came together. And it's funny because I'll take notes if something comes to me. Usually 2 a.m, a song will come to me, and I'll get up and I'll just like take notes, and then I'll work on lyrics for a couple of days, and then when the lyrics I start to get the roll of the song, then I'll put music to it. and it hardly ever starts with music for me. It's funny. It starts with the poetry part of it, the lyrics part of it. I think that there's a lot of blazing guitar players. There's a lot of people that are virtuoso players, but I don't know that they're songwriters so much. And I, as much as I can play guitar okay, and I think I can hold my own, that's not important to me when it comes to making music. It's
Mhm.
about, well, Muddy Waters used to give his guitar players one chorus, 12 bars, because it was really a break from the vocal. And now I get more of a feeling that the vocal is a break for the lead from the lead guitar, and people are waiting for the lead guitar. Well, when is he going to play? What's he saying? I don't care what he's saying. Let's hear some shredding. So there's the post Stevie Ray and Eddie Van Halen world of guitar players is not like the world I came from. Jimmy Vaughn, uh,
Yeah.
even Buddy Guy back then, even anyone in playing with Muddy Waters, and I loved Johnny Winter and Mike Bloomfield and a lot of players that didn't play a lot of choruses over and over. It was about each solo counted. Hubert Sumlin got 12 bars to play a solo, with Wolf, and they said something. So that's it for me. I do really, really appreciate and respect virtuoso guitar players. I mean, my friend Joe is one of the best. Eric Gale's one of the best. These
Mhm.
guys are all from the post Eric Johnson school of playing guitar. They say it through their guitar, and I try to say it through my lyrics. It's a little bit different.
Well, so the album was composed during COVID, and you started laying tracks as soon as you had a chance, which was probably what, 6 months ago?
No, actually, we started a while back, and then we're sidelined again when things got bad. But we were wearing masks when we were cutting. We were out playing, and we would go down to the basement and with a mask on, and we were cutting, and we really cut it in 2 days, and then went up to
Okay.
Woodstock and cut the last three. The last three tracks we cut were "Beware the Wolf," uh, uh, "Going Down Fast," which is sort of like my tribute to my dear friend Levon Helm and the band, and that has the accordion on it, and it's very band centric. And "Going Back Up the Country" with just me and John and Jesse playing upright. So at Woodstock, we cut those in one day in Woodstock. So we had done 8 already, and I felt like I was done almost. There's 3 more in the can that didn't go on the record, and I got rid of those 3 and I put these last 3 on, and I thought I had a more complete record because I was missing that acoustic element, I thought, and I didn't have, to me, a Howlin' Wolf shuffle, which I needed to call it a
Okay.
blues record. There's certain criteria you have to meet and
It's like
swing
saying
it.
it's like saying a dog is a cat because it's got a cat suit on.
Well, yeah, but I wrote a song. I have a song that I have cut a number of times, and it's about that. And I said, you know what, I can't release this because somebody's going to come at me. But it has the first chorus is, my dog wants to be a cat, my cat wants to be a cat wants to be a dog, chickens rolling around in the mud thinking it's a hog, you know, and and I said, I can't do that. I can't. Somebody's going to come back and saying I'm being mean to a certain bunch of people, and
Uh,
so I felt that way, that I think it is ridiculous. Maybe down the road, if things ever get more sane, if we get a
no,
little defensive.
no, but if you find that the song is worth recording and putting out, let them be irate. Let them come at you. Let them give their flack. But it's
No, it doesn't.
you're not pointing the gun at anyone when you're doing a song because it's what it is. I mean, yes, okay, there's cancel culture, but for God's sakes, you're not Andrew Dice Clay or anything else
No, no,
insulting
no.
the masses.
Mine is more of an observation on society than just me.
Mm.
The last verse was, and I'll recite the last verse to you. Can't say he or she no more now, it's them or they. Him and her and you and me have surely seen our day. And I felt like, all this semantics, all this like language was coming into play, and common sense seemed to be going by the by. But I'm older, and a lot of people And I'm not saying I was bullied. I didn't want to be the bully. I didn't want to
Okay.
feel like I was the bully because, you know, it's a very fine line, but somebody said to me, hey, what if Neil Young thought that when he wrote Ohio, right? What if Neil Young said, oh, I can't sing Tin Soldiers and Nixon coming, but he did, and it was a #1 hit. so, it's, I'm not going to be so shy. I may release that song eventually.
Well, the
It's a
reason
good
why is
song.
because I don't the only time I censor an artist is when the language is not going to pass through the CRTC rules. My song, usually any blues songs, it's very rare that you'll have somebody swearing.
Yeah.
And if it does, it's usually by the end of the night, closer to midnight, that I do my play for those. But I mean, to give you a very good example of people overreacting for no good reason, the Christmas song "Cold Outside" that was released
Oh, yeah,
by
but it's cold outside.
umpteenth amount
Sure.
of was censored for a month and a half
They said it
because
was date rape.
yeah. Well,
Well,
where in the song is it actually stating that that's happening?
I think we're coming back to sensibility a bit, to the middle. The pendulum, as you know, the pendulum swings all the way to one side, and then it gets stuck up there somehow. It doesn't swing back to the middle. It gets like jammed. Somebody's got to go unjam it. You don't want it all the way to one side or all the way to the other. You'd want it in the middle, because then you can have a conversation that's easier to have. The line. There was a line. Now that you mention that, there was a line in the very first song in Blues in the 21st where I said, "You can't deny it. Facts is facts. We're double screwed and triple vaxxed." It was originally we're double effed. You know,
Oh, okay.
that's going to be a problem somewhere. If I say FUCK, even though the Democrats are screaming F Trump now on the news, they're still getting bleeped. And I don't want my record bleeped, and I don't want some parent coming to me and saying, even if a kid is saying that in his home, or it's not my job to put
Yeah,
that out there to influence people. I think the word screwed is actually a funnier. It sings better. you
it
know.
does actually.
So
And
I
those,
left it there, but no, I was thoughtful in that though too, because like you, I don't want to. They used to put remember that advisory content. I don't want that on my record. I don't know if they still do it. But
no, they still do it depending on what's said. If the content is too much of a firebomb, they'll put parental advisory, or they might not even publish it. They
right,
might
even
pull it.
violence, even if it promotes violence, you
Yeah,
know, it's a problem. But it's not a bad thing to be thoughtful about what you're
no,
putting in. So but to me the blues is something that to do another cover of something written by an African American that experienced a certain thing, and then for me to do my version of it, it's kind of like, well, it's almost, it's not dishonest. It's more like doing Shakespeare or doing something that's been written before, and doing your version of it. A lot of this stuff to me is poetry. Chuck Berry
mm,
is absolute poetry. But why not make your own blues? Because we all have them for one reason or another. There's enough going on in everybody's life that maybe you'll find my blues interesting, or you'll connect with me dropping my medication down the drain. Or, it's basically blues. The blues is a bit of a complaint put to music, and it can be a love story put to music, and it can make you sad or make you happy. Something can make you smile.
true.
It can make you think, oh my God, that just happened to me. I can't believe his car broke. He broke down, and even that little donut in the back was flat. That little thing they put in there, because you never use it, and by the time you get to it, it doesn't work anyway. So,
Mm,
and that's, those kind of things are everyday situations. Yes, they may be first world problems, but when
it,
it's happening to you, it seems like the worst thing in the world.
well, it's funny because the um, how can I put it? It's blue. The blues has no boundaries in regards to time. So if you go back to the traditionals which are available for you to use and play the way that you wanted by doing an arrangement to something that was written and is now in the public domain, you have fun with it.
Sure. Well, that's
It's
what Canned
like,
Heat did. Canned Heat did that with their Canned Heat did that in the beginning when they took Henry Thomas's Bulldozer Blues and did Going Up the Country,
yeah,
but they credited him as a writer. But still, the beauty about Canned Heat, who I play with now, and I tell them all the time, I tell Cito, the drummer, who's the only original surviving member now, uh, and I'll tell him, well, when I was 13, I was so impressed. I thought I was in this band, and I bought every album and learned every song, and I dug the way you guys would rework, a Blind Lemon Jefferson song or a Henry Thomas song, or Tommy Johnson's Canned Heat Blues, and you would make it your own. You would make it your hippie rock version of it, which turned us all on to looking backwards at the original. And
yeah,
that was all folklore anyway. Nobody really, when you talk about Leadbelly writing Goodnight Irene, well, apparently his uncle showed him that song, and his uncle had done it in minstrel shows on riverboats. So that song goes back to nobody really wrote it. Nobody knows who wrote it. But the first person to put their name on the publishing, the evil of the publishing company comes into play. And that's why when Led Zeppelin
yeah.
was doing rewrites of You Need Love, became Whole Lot of Love, a Willie Dixon song. When the Lemon song was Killin' Floor, another Willie Dixon song. They thought it was folklore and that anybody could do what they wanted with it until they got sued. But, in the
But
old days, that's the way the blues worked, man.
yeah, but the funny thing is that because it's public domain, everything is fair game. And I learned recently that if someone decides to play one of your songs, to not get flagged, they have to play it exactly the same way without doing any modifications.
Yeah.
By doing the recording, that means that you get the royalties because you wrote the song. The record company gets a cut, and so does the band. So I thought it was a very big evil machine at one point until I learned this less than 6 months ago. So,
Well,
and I'm
for
50.
learned
So,
that from Happy being Got to Give It Up by Marvin Gaye. And but you know what? Way before that, though, it had gone on, especially in the soul and African American blues and soul. It had
hmm,
gone on that borrowing a riff, even, or whatever. It was okay. Nobody complained about it. But once the big companies like Atlantic and CBS and EMI, once they all got involved, it became, there's so many lawyers, we got to use them. So so many people come out of school with a law degree. There's got to be someone to sue about every little thing now. So,
true.
unfortunately, it gets in the way because you can be inspired. I personally think Pharrell was inspired by Marvin Gaye, yes, but wasn't intending on ripping him off, But
No.
that's what happens, That's what happens.
Yeah. Now, before I forget, before I forget, so the album is done. It's going to be released the 14th, and it's going to be a 14th, 14th,
The 14th, yeah, yeah,
Valentine's Day, folks. It's a perfect
in
album
a couple
as
of
a
days.
love token.
We're talking Friday, right?
It is.
Yeah.
So take it from me. I've listened to it umpteenth amount of times. If you've got a blues lover who loves you very much, give it to him as a gift. It's one of those give records that gives a lot. Um, the next thing I'd like to ask, because you're 70 and looking fine, do you have any hobbies that you like to actually do other than full-time music, reading,
Well,
writing, or whatnot?
I paint. I painted if you see the cover of Final Vinyl, the Canned Heat record, I painted that.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, yeah. I during that was the other thing I picked up again during COVID was painting, and I started painting, and I painted some. I right away, but I'm such a shallow person that I painted Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and Hubert Sumlin. I didn't paint a seascape or a dog or a bowl of fruit. No, I painted blues heroes.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Like I always remember, R. Crumb, who was famous as a cartoonist and had like Zap Comics and all that stuff, that he had made this deck of blues cards that was available, and R. Crumb was the one who did those, and he's a big hero of mine as a cartoonist, as an artist. So I did what R. Crumb would do. I said, well, let me put a Howlin' Wolf record on and paint Howlin' Wolf while I'm listening to him, and sort of, and that kept my head doing both things at once. That's what I like to do, is either paint or guitar or write songs, and now songwriting has overtaken almost everything in my life. Because maybe, as you said, I'm downloading the final, years, and would like to get another couple of records out, I think, before I'm done, because I find that once you get one thing out of the way that you wanted to say, there's some more stuff to say,
Always.
and each one becomes sort of thematic in its own way, and something will happen every day, like John Lennon used to pick up the newspaper, and then, when he saw a Kellogg's cornflakes ad on TV, and he wrote good morning, because it was like good morning about Kellogg's cornflakes. I said, oh, that's a good idea for a song, So we're always looking for things, songwriters are always examining things in a different way. And if you want to write songs, you should really just take like a couple of weeks and just listen to Bob Dylan and Chuck Berry, just those two guys. All right. Just listen to them, because they have a way of their street poetry is so simple, and in a way, Chuck Berry is probably the root of all rock and roll songwriting that we know. And I'm not talking about just like all the Louis Jordan that he learned and got all those funny bits. He got all the like Saturday Night Fish, all those kind of good, having a good time things. But he also connected to white and black youth with his songs about cars and complaining about school, and having nowhere to go, no particular place to go. Just like, I'm bored, I'm a kid, I'm going to turn the radio up and drive, And then Dylan took it to this sort of, it was sort of, was it political, or was it, who's he talking about? It's kind of because Dylan had all of that other poetry, all the Allen Ginsbergs and the Ferlinghettis and all the other poets that were happening at the time. So the beat poets. So you get, and even Bob Dylan would have to admit that Chuck Berry had to be one of his biggest influences, because when you take those list songs like Too Much Monkey Business, and then you put it side by side with Subterranean Homesick Blues, you'll say, oh, this is Bob's version. Johnny's in the basement cooking up the medicine, and Chuck Berry's too, about Army chow, Army food, Army like dollar gas, whatever. He's talking about stopping at the filling station, and wipe the windows, dollar gas. It's like all the same. Those are list songs, they're called, and they're both famous for that. And if you listen to those things and start listing things in your head, that bother you or that you like, all of a sudden a song's going to come out of that. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you think you have no musical ability. We can all do this.
True. I'm glad that you haven't stopped doing it, that lyrics are haunting you on a daily basis. So the one question I'd like to ask is, what's your favorite food dish?
Oh, I have to say, after all this time, I think it's linguine with white clam sauce.
Oh, nice.
I think that because I like to make it at home. I like to go and I'll always ask, are the clams fresh? And I have favorite places, but hardly anybody can screw it up. Almost anywhere you go, it's good.
So, I because you're wise, I'd like to ask you about what musical hero? Well, what musician that you enjoyed actually doing blues with? I know Joe Bonamassa is one of them because you mentioned them, but any particular artists that you actually
Live,
had a
alive,
chance
alive. You mean alive right now?
live or that? Well, could be alive, could be dead. I know
Well,
Eric Gales is unfortunately
there's
still alive.
some that brought so much joy to me, and at the same time mentorship, and that were like my Yodas. Okay,
Okay.
and that would be going to go back to and this was all due respect to everybody else I've ever worked with. That would be Laura Nero, right? And then it would be Johnny Johnson, piano player from Chuck Berry. Taught me more than so much about how to play in a Chicago style blues band. And Hubert Sumlin and Son Seals were two others that I worked very closely with. And then Levon Helm from the band. You know, being through Levon, I worked with Garth and with Rick Danko and the rest of the guys too. And and then, you know, my friend Brian Bezazi, who taught me most of, he was Muddy Waters. He was Muddy Waters' right hand man, sort of road manager, took care of Muddy, but also played guitar. He was a spare tire guitar player. In case one of the guitar players didn't make it, Brian would jump in and play. We grew up
Okay.
together since, you know, since like seventh grade. And he's the one that I love playing with because he taught me so much as we were kids about listen to this, listen to this, listen to Sammy Lawhorn and Pee Wee Madison, you know, listen to Robert Jr. Lockwood, listen to the things that are going on behind Sonny Boy between the two guitars, you know, between Luther Tucker and Robert Jr. and Matt Murphy, you know, those guys. And then I learned a lot about it and then playing with Bob Margolin, who did a lot of time with Muddy. When him and I got together and started playing, and the same thing with John Sebastian and Al Cooper, who I'll end it with Al Cooper because he's the most important one. But John Sebastian and Bob Margolin, we had the same thing going where we had this two guitars playing, but we had this weave going of naturally jumping to an alternate part. Each one of us listening to what the other guy was doing and knowing how what Keith called the weave, you know, between the two guitars, and Muddy and Jimmy Rogers called it filling in the cracks. Like wherever somebody's not doing something, that's where you do something. You fill in the
Okay.
cracks. And then Al Cooper, of course, became my best friend, and I learned so much from him because I was a B3 player and a guitar player, and he was the same thing, you know. And we became kindred spirits and did so much great work together. And you know, I've been so blessed with the people who, and I'll say this all the time, walked out of my record collection into my life, and were just wonderful. Even Chuck Berry, yes.
So that means that with everything that you've experienced in your lifetime, you've been able to take bits and pieces, fitting them together as the needs be, and then keeping yourself spry is probably the best way of saying it because you're moving constantly. Your mind is focusing on things that you have around you, building the songs, dreaming up tunes. I'm assuming that you do it on your guitar, or do you do it on the B3?
I do some on piano. I do some. I have a piano right by the bed, and I have a guitar right by the bed. But
Okay.
usually it's pick up the phone and go to notes, you know, on the iPhone and just start writing. If it, you know, a hook line might come or a line might come that I like, you know, and then I'll go back to it in a day and look at it and go, oh yeah, okay, so yeah. But sometimes there was a few times where a song would just come out like boom, you know, like that. That song "Fool's Gold" that's on the record is the oldest song that I've written, and I wrote that. Uh, I think I wrote that around 1991. That one,
Wow.
and
Okay.
Catherine Russell, who is a great singer, you can look her up. She's got her own jazz albums, but she used to be in my band, the Black Italians. Catherine Russell sang it originally with me on the Vivino brothers' first album. She sang it, and she also sang it on my 13 Live that I cut at Levon's Barn, and Catherine Russell. I kind of wrote that song for her, and then this was the first time I ever recorded it. So that one means a lot to me, and that one came out like right away. But then I didn't write another song for years, you know. So it was, you get so busy working. No, when you get so busy working, and
It's true.
I was, Ben Montench, who played piano and organ with the Heartbreakers with Tom Petty.
Mm-hmm.
Him and I speak a lot, and we spoke today, and he said, "Yeah, I have and he's a year older than me. He's 71. He said, "Yeah, I have a record coming out. I'm starting the tour, on April 2nd." And I said, the two of us are putting like our first records out in a long time because we've been so busy working. We've been so busy working that we haven't thought of our own music much, And we were just talking about Tom, how Tom was a great. When Tom Petty would sing or play the blues, you would say, "Oh, this guy, the blues is losing something. They need this guy to make a blues record." But he's to me, Tom Petty was the last of the great singer-songwriters, rock and rollers that I really dig. And that's from that generation. I know there's new stuff happening for new audiences.
There is, but
there, after a while, don't we get enough? Don't we have enough music to listen to?
the funny thing about it is that I've been doing radio for 30 years. And in those 30 years, I had a mentor that gave me my first recommendations and tricks and tips. And he said, "Don't play blues and jazz together because you're going to piss off the masses." I said, "Okay." Well, I decided to do it my way after doing it his way for a year. And I started mixing and matching. I'd play 3 blues tunes and then 3 jazz tunes, but try to find a common denominator in the tempo so that it wasn't all over the place.
Let me tell you a quick story about Miles Davis. A sax player was going to sit in with Miles on something, and it's a break between sets, like at Birdland or wherever. And Miles says, in his best Miles, "What you want to play, man?" And the sax player says, "Man, let's do something simple. Let's just play a blues." And Miles said, "You better pick something else." Because Miles knew that at the root of everything jazz was the blues. And so did Louis Armstrong know that. And so did Thelonious Monk know that. And Duke Ellington and Count Basie surely knew that. Because when you listen to Count Basie, most of it is blues. You think of Jimmy Rush singing, "Gone to Chicago, but I can't take you." Or you think of Joe Turner singing with him,
Joe Turner.
And you think Big Joe Turner at Kansas City style blues with Pete Johnson on piano. That boogie woogie is the connection between the two. That's the connection. That's the, and that shit was, that stuff was that was going on in Memphis with like Finest Newborn, who could, the Newborn brothers were up in Memphis playing on blues records, but at the same time cutting jazz records, swing records, really, because if it doesn't swing, like Duke Ellington said, it don't mean to think of it, ain't got that swing. Same thing with blues,
True.
Yeah.
Long John Baldry, when he decided to come to Canada, he first lived in Toronto, and then he said, he was 6 foot something, and he actually said, I've got it up to here with snow. So he decided to go out west.
And that's pretty high for him up to here.
Yeah, he went to Vancouver and he lived out his life, and sadly he passed away too early. But one of his famous sayings is that I like to really play the bougie woogie.
Bougie woogie. That's right. And you know what? It's funny because Blind Lemon Jefferson called it the boogarooga. I like to play the boogarooga. And basically, I got to tell you, that was the blues. And I always have this conversation about the blues coming up from Texas, piano playing. That piano playing came up from the Turpentine camps who would have maybe a piano, and the whorehouses all had a piano in them. So guys like Speckled Red and Jelly Roll Morton and James P. Johnson, they're playing in whorehouses, basically. They're the piano players. And that's where
Speakeasies.
ragtime and boogie woogie come together, because people wanted to dance. I worked with an old cat named Yank Rochelle. You can look him up, Rachell. He played blues, mandolin, and guitar, and he used to play with Sonny Boy Williamson 1, the original John Lee Williamson. And he also had a trio with John, was it John Estes, Sleepy John Estes, and Hammy Nixon and him. And he said, we're not musicians, we're entertainers, because people wouldn't put money in the bucket unless they could dance, So it wasn't about people sitting with their arms folded like they do today saying, boy, that guitar player's good. It was more about, can I get up and dance to this and have a drink and have a good time? And if you forget that, you're getting a little self-important, that it should move people some way, and beyond the cerebral part of it, which is why there aren't too many. There's not the reason, guys, that there's not too many women into the blues is because they're not dancing to it, and they got to get up. Women are the key. When they start tapping their foot and digging it, Oh, there's a telemarketer. I'm going to dump him. I'm going to singers and writers. It's becoming a little bit more, the audience is actually getting bigger. People say it's getting smaller, but it's getting bigger. Look, I just toured with Samantha Fish and Galia Volt, who is an incredible musician that plays a one-woman. She plays with the bass drum and the guitar and the snare drum with her foot at the same time, just like Dr. Ross did in the 50s. And there's women coming along that are finally realizing that, oh, yes, I remember, even, Sue Foley talks about Memphis Minnie and does all that all the time, and women are saying, hey, women have always been very important in the blues. In fact, the very first successful blues singers were Bessie Smith and Ma Rainey, if you recall, and somebody that I got to work with a little bit, Victoria Spivey, or Spivey, if you will, and she lived in Brooklyn when I was a kid, and me and my friend Brian would go over to her house. We'd bring her. She wanted us to bring her some champagne, and I'd sit there and play Otis Spann's piano, and she would sing from the bed, And she was one of the first not only blues stars, she also was a movie star, in black film in the 30s and 40s. So women have always been there. And actually were the only ones that were successful for a long time. Ethel Waters was another blues singer. So it's become now, look, I knew Johnny Copeland and I knew his daughter Shamika when she was a little tiny kid. And now she's like probably the most well-known blues singer in the world, and Ruthie Foster, I know from way back, who just won the Grammy here in the U.S. for the blues, is another friend of mine that I've known since she was very young. And people will say, wow, Ruthie came out of nowhere. Well, I don't know. I met her 40 years ago. So I don't know, 35 years ago or something like that. Yeah. How did she come out of nowhere? Well, you're just aware of her now, and that's what it's happening with me. Believe it or not, people are like, oh, I didn't know you weren't just a guitar player and that you could sing or that you could write or that we're going to tour or that. So it's, that keeps it fresh for me, having a bit of a surprise in your back pocket is, at my age, that's great,
Well, folks, you've heard this fine man regale us with tales of his youth to his tales of now, and his new album is going to be out this 14th of February. So please give your support.
French, please say it in French for me.
Oh, you want it in French?
Yeah.
Mesdames et messieurs, c'était une entrevue avec Jimmy Vivino et son nouvel album Blues in the 21st est maintenant disponible. Non, c'est pas Blues in the 21st. C'est gonna be 2 of those days. I can't say it in French.
No.
Il va être disponible le 14 février Le jour de l'amour.
You know what? It sounds so much better.